Fortunately, our book has recently been published by Torchlight Publishing and is now available in English. Nature's IQ is on animal instincts. Basically, there are two types of animal behavior. One is learned during the animal's lifetime from the parents or from another animal, or by invention using its own mental powers. The second type of behavior is based on inherited instincts. The latter was more interesting for us, as in these cases, the special behavior programs are coded in the animals right from the moment of their birth. The chapters of the book include 1. Innovative predator techniques. 2. Phenomena of defense, disguise, and deception. Symbiotic relationships. 4. The language of the animals. 5th. Strange migration and navigation systems. 6. Sexual behaviors. 7. Upbringing the new generation. In the last 8th chapter, we present the answer of the Puranas and other ancient Indian writings to the question of the source of such automatic mental abilities. We concluded that inborn instincts did not originate from the animal's own mental capacity and could not come into existence by slow, step-by-step evolution either. We argued that the examples of instinctive behaviors listed in the book were originally implanted into the minds of the species by a higher intelligence, probably God. Let's see a striking example, by the analysis of which we can decide whether this is a valid proposition. Let us take an excursion into the fabulous world of coral reefs, where millions of plants and animals live side by side. When a coral grouper swims up from the net, panic breaks out among the smaller creatures, and they flee in all directions, except for a slender little fish that dances forward boldly from its hiding place, approaching death. And what's more, it swims towards the grouper. Has this fish lost its senses? Why hasn't the survival instinct prompted it to flee with all the other fish? The little fish is the blue streak cleaner wrasse. We might think it will soon disappear into the grouper's stomach once and for all. But if we continue watching, we will see some surprising events. The coral grouper suddenly stops, completely opens its gills, and waits motionless, with jaws wide open. Then the cleaner wrasse courageously swims into the grouper's mouth and starts to bite off parasites and remove dead skin. The sanguinary predator bears the often painful cleaning process with patience, while it carefully avoids harming the diligent little fish. When the cleaner wrasse finishes its business, it triumphantly swims out of the huge mouth, and the grouper leaves satisfied. Modern evolutionists say that every physical and mental ability developed step by step in time by genetic mutations and natural selection. The standard evolutionary explanation is that in living world there appear, by chance, such initial traits in the living entity that give them a better chance of survival. Then these abilities give them even more advantage. The living world, however, abounds in anatomical and behavioral examples where this line of reasoning not only lacks evidence, but appears to be theoretically inapplicable. Biologists today take the Darwinian theory and its modernized versions as universal, so they they can reasonably be expected to be able to provide plausible, detailed explanations, at least in theory, for the origin of every specific phenomenon in the living world by the use of the mutation selection model. At the same time, with numerous complex behaviors, it seems impossible to conceive a detailed evolutionary process which results in the instinctive behaviors observable today. Let us try to imagine how the soul-stirring relationship of the coral grouper and the cleaner wrasse could have started. Once upon a time, there was a big predator fish and a small fish. One day, the small fish had a sudden idea. I will swim to this big fish and try to eat something from his mouth. But because he usually eats small fishes, first I will dance a little for him, and perhaps he will understand what I want. At the same time, the coral grouper thought, oh, here is a small fish. Normally, I eat them all, but this time I will let him enter my mouth. Maybe he will help me to brush my teeth. Does it sound like a scientific explanation? It doesn't, does it? The predator fish would have eaten the small fish and the story would have ended quickly. For a relationship to be established between the two fishes, the following items of information must be present and the following steps of action must be simultaneously taken by the fishes. The small cleaner fish must recognize and approach the predatory fish. Meanwhile, perform a special dance to draw attention to its charity service, as if waving a white flag of surrender, so as not to fall prey to the grouper, and swim into the mouth of the predatory fish. While the small fish is engaged in the above series of action, the coral grouper must exhibit the following instinctive knowledge and actions. It must identify the small fish by seeing its movements and know that it enjoys immunity and its activities will be useful. It must stop and open its mouth and gill cover. It must not harm the small fish during the cleaning process. To ensure mutually advantageous cooperation for the two partners, steps A to F must be taken simultaneously. If only just one of these steps were missing, the procedure would be mutually inoperative or would simply end up with the death of the cleaner fish. As the behaviors of the two fishes are only useful if they are mutual and complete with all their elements, the evolutionary line of reasoning breaks down. If the possible previous states had not been advantageous for the two fishes, then they would not have survived and thus could not have evolved in the symbiotic behavior that is to be benefited hundreds of thousands of years later. Inborn instincts are sometimes very complicated, and because of logical reasons, it is hard to imagine how they could have appeared through small modifications. On the one hand, these instinctive behavior chains could not appear in their present form by a sudden large-scale genetic mutation because they are very complex and are probably coded in the long sections of the DNA whose sudden spontaneous emergence is genetically impossible. On the other hand, gradual development of complex instincts is also disputable. In certain behaviors, simpler, so-called earlier versions may be assumed to have existed and are perhaps observable in the living world.